1 hour.
Yep. Minimum.
Guaranteed.
Yep.
Okay. So thank you very much. So we're going to present a very interesting presentation, seminar today. It's entitled The Founder Acharya is Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. And we'll understand where the term Founder Acharya came from and why Srila Prabhupada insisted on this term. But first we'll chant Jai Radha. Let's see. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Jai Om Vishnubhad Paramahamsa Parvatakarya also Katha Satashi Shrimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrind Ki Jai Samacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Ram Se Go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudhi Gaur Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govinda Sayam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Ki Jai Machuram Ki Jai Navadiptam Ki Jai Jagat Dasami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shivadila Singh Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai Gaur Vrindavan All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur. So Om Ganat Yananjana Shakar Shlakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So I'd like to do this brief presentation, which is based on a study group that we have on the GBC entitled Prabhupada's Position. It's very important for us to understand Prabhupada's superlative position as Founder Acharya and why Srila Prabhupada used the term Founder Acharya and where the term came from. Because it's a very interesting term. It's neither Sanskrit nor English. It's a combination or amalgamation of two words in Sanskrit and English. You don't find that combination, of course, in the Vedic literatures, because in the Vedic literatures you don't find English, right? You just find Sanskrit. So the rough translation would be Samstavaka Acharya. But this term was actually invented, or first came up, under the auspices of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we'll present the history of this. So Prabhupada himself insisted upon this term being used. In fact, in the early days of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, there was devotees who made a mistake in the publication of one book. They actually titled the book A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami instead of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Prabhupada became very angry, and he accused the devotees, and rightly so, of being affected by enviousness coming from his godbrothers, which is really interesting. So Srila Prabhupada did insist on that term, and we're going to examine the meaning of what Founder Acharya is. Now, if you look on the history of the Gaudiya Math, which is the founded by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, you don't find that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is called the Founder Acharya, which is really an interesting point. So to see where this term came out, we examined some of the early Gaudiya Math literatures. And here's two right here. There's the Harmonist, and the Harmonist, of course, was taken from the Sajanatoshini, which was a Bengali magazine that was later translated into English. And this Harmonist was one of the first Gaudiya English magazines to propagate the glories of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we were able, and the devotees were able to access reproductions of all the issues of the Harmonist to try to understand this particular term. And the other source is this book called the Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And this book was written by a Professor Sanyal. Professor Sanyal was a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur worked together very, very closely. There's a picture of him right there, Nishkant Sanyal. They worked very closely, and even they edited and published books in each other's names. That's how much Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur trusted him. He was a professor of history and, of course, quite expert in the English language. So this Sri Krishna Chaitanya was published right before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sent his disciples to the Western world. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had planned to not only send the disciples to the Western world, beginning with London and Germany, but actually to go there himself and preach after the mission was set up. But in order to do that, they understood you have to have some literature. Because if you just go there empty-handed, without anything to show, then nobody will take you seriously. I mean, I'll give you a practical example. When I came in here to Australia, they asked me if I had any spiritual literature in immigration to prove that I was a devotee. And the devotee wasn't enough for them. I said, don't you believe I'm a Hare Krishna? No, we want to see Bhagavad Gita. And unfortunately, I have all my books on my iPad. So I said, no books, but they're on my iPad and computer if you want to see. So they accepted my particular understanding and explanation. So in other words, if you're going to go preach somewhere, you better have some books. And Prabhupada would chastise the devotees when they would preach somewhere and people would ask for books, and they said, oh, we don't have any books with us. So devotees should always carry books to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. So this Sri Krishna Chaitanya was meant to be like the foundational book for preaching in the Western world. It was written in such a language that practically none of us would be able to understand. Very, very high English. So we see that Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, pretty much followed in the footsteps of these devotees in the sense that he published his books, the Srimad Bhagavatam, before he went to the Western world. Now the interesting thing is that this book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, was published with the help of a whole Gaudiya Math, a lot of money, a lot of followers, and Prabhupada published his 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam with the help of who? Does anyone remember who else did? Who? Krishna. There were no disciples helping Prabhupada. Prabhupada had to personally carry the paper, personally collect the donations for publishing the book, and did everything single-handedly. The same thing that took a whole institution to do, Prabhupada did all by himself. So you see Prabhupada following in their particular example. And Srila Prabhupada very much appreciated this Sri Krishna Chaitanya. You can see here. I'll read the text. I don't know if all you can see it. One of the devotees came across this book and Prabhupada said, I'm glad to learn that Donald, because that was an uninitiated devotee, obviously, not Donald does, or Donald, anyway, what's the real thing. So that's Professor Sanyal's book, Krishna Chaitanya. Late Professor Sanya was my godbrother, and his book, Krishna Chaitanya, is approved and authoritative. Keep it carefully, and we may publish this book in Back to Godhead, some articles from the book. It will help us a great deal because my spiritual master had given his approval to this book. Please keep it carefully, and when I return, I shall see to it. So, as I mentioned before, the title Founder Acharya was never used by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But the title is found in 3 places. First of all, in Sri Krishna Chaitanya, in reference to what we'll speak about in a second, the original founder acharyas of the sampradayas. You've heard the 4 sampradayas. You have the Lakshmi Sampradaya, you have the Brahma Sampradaya, you have the Kumara Sampradaya, and the Rudra Sampradaya, right? And those are the 4 prehistoric, they're called the prehistoric founder acharyas. So that's where that's mentioned, the word founder acharya by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and by Professor Sanyal. So here's the introduction, the introductory chapter of this particular book is called the Founder Acharyas. Incidentally, this book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, dealt with a subject matter called ecclesiology. Now that's a big word for all of you. You may not have heard that word before. That basically means the study of the setup of a church. Like it comes from Latin, ecclesias, which means the assembly, having an assembly. So, in the introductory chapter of this book, it states, the systems of Sri Vishnu Swami, Sri Nimbarkacharya, that is, Sri Ramanuja and Sri Madhvacharya marked the revival of Vaishnavism traceable to the prehistoric records. Now what that means, the prehistoric founders were the four founders I mentioned before, like Lakshmi and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. So these are the modern founder acharyas here who carried on the work of the prehistoric founder acharyas. They embody the essential worship of Vishnu. Their secondary value consists of being an uncompromising protest against the opinions of the speculative creeds. That means the Mayavadis. Their spiritual synthesis, although sound, is incomplete, which is interesting. In other words, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur accepts the opinions of the four basic acharyas, and he says what they're saying is true, but it's not complete. Does anyone know who completed it?
Shankaracharya?
No, who completed the synthesis of all the acharyas and pulled it together in the perfect philosophy? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is his philosophy called? Achintya Bheda Tattva. So that's where it became complete in Lord Chaitanya's teaching. And there's more in this book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, and I'll read that. The contributions of Vishnu Swami, Nimbarkacharya, it's Nimbarkacharya, Ramanuja and Madhva, the founder acharyas of the four Vaishnava communities or sampradayas of the present day, to the cause of theism are so valuable and so necessary to know for a proper understanding of the theological position of, there he is, Sri Chaitanya, that we shall close our brief survey of the historical trend of theistic thought with a short account of the systems of the four great Vaishnavacharyas who preceded Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So here you see the four founder acharyas and their prehistoric teachers. This is what I described before, and I'll use the little pointer. So you see Rudra, of course that's Lord Shiva, and then you have Vishnu Swami, who was the founder acharya, following the footsteps of Rudra. Then you have the Chatushana, that's the four Kumaras. And then you have Sri Nimbarkacharya, who taught Dvaita. You have Lakshmi Sampradaya, and of course the famous Sripad Ramanujacharya, who taught Vishishta Dvaita. And finally, our Sampradaya, which is known as the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. And you have Madhvacharya, who taught the Dvaita or dualistic concept. So the second member of each pair are considered founder acharyas in the modern day and age. So this is how important the term founder acharya is. These very, very important acharyas who re-established the religious principles of their sampradaya. That's the position of a founder acharya. Not just a guru, but someone who does something special, spreads Krishna consciousness all over the world, or adapts Krishna consciousness to the modern day world. So here's some quotes about founder acharya in the Harmonist. This is a 1930 version of the Harmonist. And I don't think we need to read all that, it's quite a bit. But it's dealing with these prehistoric personalities and the historic founder acharyas that I mentioned before. Now, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established as the main temple for preaching what's called the Bagh Bazar Temple in Calcutta. Now, this is a temple that later on, there was a lot of conflict in this temple. In fact, even after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur started this temple, the devotees were fighting over who would have what room. Can you imagine that? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually left this world in disgust because he was not pleased with his disciples. And he said to Srila Prabhupada, while he was walking with Srila Prabhupada in Radhakund, he said, if you ever get any money, publish books. And he also said, there'll be a fire in the mouth. In other words, he understood that devotees and the mission would practically self-destruct. And that's really what happened, because in the Gaudiya mission, they did not follow the instruction, one of the primary instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which was to form a governing body commission. That word came from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he took it actually from the Indian railway system. Because the commission that governs the Indian railway system is called the GBC. So I'm a member of that commission, not the Indian railway system. So, I don't want anything to do with the Indian railway system. So because the Gaudiya Math people and then the Acharyas, they fought with each other over, even before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left, and what to speak of afterwards, the mission fell apart, and Prabhupada said that many of them became asara, or useless, because of not following that instruction. Those who disobey the order of the Guru, they become useless. Even though they may look the same, sound the same, speak the same, the potency is not there. So remember, that's why Srila Prabhupada said that any member of ISKCON who tries to be Krishna conscious and thinks he's Krishna conscious outside of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness is living a what? Anyone know the word Prabhupada used? Hallucination. You know what a hallucination is? That's when people take drugs. They see hallucinations. And that's what one is doing if they leave Prabhupada, shelter of the society. So anyone who's a bona fide follower of Srila Prabhupada will stay within his society. Prabhupada compared ISKCON to a ship. And I know a ship in the sea rocks from side to side, and you may get a little seasick. You know what seasick is? You may hang off the edge, you know, doing something. But you don't jump into the water. That would be foolish. So in ISKCON, there'll be problems. Prabhupada compared ISKCON to a hospital. Now, if you go into a hospital, you're going to find a lot of sick people, right? But the idea is that people are getting better. So don't leave the hospital just because the person next to you is coughing. You better just stay and get better, right? So I'm getting out of here. This hospital is full of sick people. Kind of stupid, isn't it? So you should stay and get better. So this Bhagavazar temple was actually the main temple for preaching Krishna consciousness of the Gaudiya Math. Now the main temple of the Gaudiya Math itself is the Mayapur temple, which they had. And the person who built this temple, his name was Jagabandhu, a very, very famous devotee of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in fact, celebrated and commemorated this devotee's disappearance day after this devotee disappeared. And so this was considered the main branch of the Gaudiya Math for preaching to the world, because at that time, Calcutta was a world-class city. It used to be the main capital of the British Empire. And after the partition of India and all the people came from Bangladesh, Calcutta became pretty much of a mess, the city that is. So now we'll talk about the relationship. This is important, and you'll understand why it is when we talk about Prabhupada. The relationship between the Gaudiya Math and the Sri Chaitanya Math. Now, the Sri Chaitanya Math is the Math in Mayapur, the Math or temple in Mayapur, and the Gaudiya Math is the temple in Calcutta. So the Mayapur temple, the Sri Chaitanya Math, is considered to be the root of the tree. And if you know the example given in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, how the material world is compared to the reflection of a banyan tree on a lake or a body of water, and the root is up and the branches are down. And if you can actually go through the root, you can get to the spiritual world. So there's this interesting word used in this respect as far as the root is concerned. It's a science fiction word. Anyone's heard of the word portal? Seen any science fiction films? No. A portal is like when you go through something in the universe and you end up on the other side of the universe. So Sridham Mayapur, and at that time, the Chaitanya Math in Mayapur was considered to be like a portal. Does everyone understand that term? No, I think I have to explain it. It's like, you have to watch a science fiction film to understand it. I mean, it's hard to explain. It's like you go through a door. You know, the word portal means like a door. You go through a door. Let's say if we were to walk through this door right now and we'd end up at Govardhan. There's some science fiction, or it would have to be a spiritual thing. You walk through the door and all of a sudden you're at Govardhan. That would be a portal. A door that transports you to either another dimension, another place in time and space. That's what a portal is. So Mayapur is envisioned by the Acharyas as a portal. In other words, you enter into Mayapur and that transports you to the spiritual world. And we're going to explain what Prabhupada, or how Prabhupada envisioned this portal. which is really an interesting realization. So, we talked already about ecclesiology. That's a branch of theology that deals with the spiritual constitution and function of a church, and I explained that already to you. So here's the tree analogy. In the Gaudiya Math, the Sri Chaitanya Math was actually the root of it, and all the other temples were branches. Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada envisioned the same thing in ISKCON. You had Sridham Mayapur would be the root of the tree. As Prabhupada said, Mayapur is where he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, isn't it? And of course, Bombay was his office. So, Sridham Mayapur is like the root of the tree, and we're all branches of Sridham Mayapur. Think about that for a second. Even, you may consider Sydney to be the center of the universe. Does anyone here consider like a... Some of you do. I mean, I was with Prabhupada, where was this? This was in Gainesville, Florida in 1971. Prabhupada arrived in Gainesville, Florida. Florida's in the United States. And Prabhupada said, I'm very happy to be here in this far-off place. The place is very far away, at the edge of the universe practically. Prabhupada didn't say those words, I'm paraphrasing. But we were shocked. We think, well, this is an important place, the center of our lives, the center of the universe. But then, now I'm understanding Prabhupada meant far distant from Mayapur. Because Mayapur is actually at the root of the tree. And there's references to this tree in the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I don't think I can read any of these things. Actually, you can. All the parts of this tree are spiritually cognizant. This is the Chaitanya tree. And thus, as they grow, they spread all over the world. Interesting. And Lord Chaitanya says, I am the only gardener. How many places can I go? How many fruits can I pick and distribute? And that's from the CC also. So these are different quotes that continue with this particular metaphor of a tree, comparing it to spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. There's a picture of the modern day Sri Chaitanya Math. And it's stated, the Sri Chaitanya Math is eternally located as the original source, even when it is manifested in the view of the people of this world, in the transcendental environment of the eternal abode of the divinity. These are descriptions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And now you can begin to see where they were introducing the term founder acharya, although Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur never himself used that term. This is from The Harmonist in 1936. The Gaudiya Math is the instrument and counterpart of His Divine Grace, Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. It lives and moves and has its being in the founder acharya. So they're sort of introducing this term at this point in 1936. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's vision was that he would send his devotees, as mentioned here, Van Maharaj and Tirtha Maharaj. Tirtha Maharaj was actually initiated by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and given sannyas by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And another devotee, Ananda, to London. He planned then, after they were successful, to go to the West. And Srila Prabhupada commented that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world out of disappointment. Now we're going to explain somewhat of that disappointment. They went to London, and the first thing that they wanted to do was look for a temple, which is on the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They came back, having found a place for a temple, and they actually found there was a devotee in India, one of the kings in India, who was going to sponsor the temple in London. Yet, after some time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur got so disturbed for one reason or another with these devotees, he told the person who was going to sponsor the temple, don't give them money. And he never talked, this first devotee you see up there, Van Maharaj, he never talked to Van Maharaj again in his pastimes, in his life again. There was something that happened. Well, I'm not going to speculate, but Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that when one performs devotional service, then one of the things that can cause anarthas is the byproducts of devotional service. In other words, you preach, and then people start to appreciate you, right? and you begin to think you're wonderful. Just like if you're a guru, you know, and I've experienced this too, you get a book written about you every year. Would that be nice? That every year there's a whole book with pictures of you in different positions, you know, smiling, Ashirvad, giving blessings, showing your lotus feet. That's called the Vyas Puja book, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And then after a while you begin to believe it, right? You begin to think that actually you have lotus feet. And then you take your socks off and put them on your head. So I may not be that bad, but the problem is that's called the byproduct of bhakti, and according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that's one of the causes of anarthas. That one becomes proud like that. So surmising that the devotees, they went there to preach, and somehow or other Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur got disgusted with them. Then, of course, also it wasn't the right time to open up a temple, because shortly after that, you know, we're talking about 1936, 37, guess what happened in Europe? Does anyone know what happened in Europe? Second World War. You had Hitler taking over most of Europe and bombing London and other things like that. So it really, time-wise, it really wasn't the right time to do it. So Srila Prabhupada took up this mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and had the same exact strategy as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which is to publish literatures in English. In fact, as I mentioned before, he published 3 volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam all by himself, practically doing the typesetting by himself, editing, proofreading, everything, and came to America with only a few trunks worth of books and practically no money at all. And Prabhupada also, instead of publishing The Harmonist, his magazine was called Back to Godhead. And Prabhupada was single-handedly distributing this magazine in Delhi and other places and raising funds for his trip. And we know he went to Srimati Moraji to beg for free passage to come to America. And there's the first 3 volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam published by Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada took up the mission, having faith in his spiritual master, and of course that picture was taken in a place called Tompkins Square Park. And Prabhupada went there, took out his cartels, was chanting, and then all the hippies joined him. I don't know if any of you know what a hippie is, but Prabhupada said it was something wonderful. When someone was asked Prabhupada, do you know what a hippie is? Prabhupada said, yes, it's something wonderful. And then also Prabhupada said, you know better than me what a hippie is. So Prabhupada took up this mission single-handedly, the mission that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had employed his whole organization to accomplish, and went to the Western world. And then Srila Prabhupada still wanted to cooperate and act as one of the just members of the Gaudiya mission. There's an interesting quote. I can't hardly read. No, he said, I am here and I see a good field for work, but I'm alone and without men and money. To start a center here, we must have our own building. Then he talks about the Krishna mission, and to have a building, he says, you need $100,000. At that time, that was worth a lot. He said 5 lakhs of rupees, and another 2 lakhs to furnish. And then he continues, but there is difficulty. There's difficulty of exchange. That means currency exchange. At that time, they didn't let you take money out of India. And I think unless you have some special arrangement for starting a branch of the Chaitanya Math, transfer of money may be difficult. For me, it will take a long time, but for you, it is very easily. The Calcutta Marwaris are in your hand. Does everyone know what a Marwari is?
Indian businessman.
Indian businessman, yeah. In other words, Prabhupada's writing to his godbrother. Here's really what's happening. Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj, not the same one who went to London before, he's a younger Tirtha Maharaj. And Prabhupada is saying, let's work together. You have the ability to get the money to buy this temple. If you agree, Prabhupada said, then take it for granted that I am one of the workers of the Sri Mayapur Chaitanya Math. So here Prabhupada is offering himself to be just one of the humble workers. And you contrast that with other people who became proud of their so-called preaching abilities, and Prabhupada He said, I just want to become one of the humble workers. I just want to see my spiritual master's mission carried out. In fact, the mission of preaching in the West, preaching in English, was given to many of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples. But Srila Prabhupada was the one who took it up seriously, with great faith and at an old age and with no money. Full faith in the spiritual master. He says, once the center is started, I will be able to start many others also. So here's the chance of cooperation between us, and I shall be glad to know if you are ready for this cooperation. I came here to study the situation. I find it very nice, and if you are also agreeable to cooperate with it, it will be very nice by the will of Srila Prabhupada. Of course, he's referring to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you agree, then take it for granted that I am, again, Prabhupada says, I am one of the workers of the Sri Mayapur Chaitanya Math. I have no ambition for becoming the proprietor of any math or mandir, but I want working facility. I am working day and night. With my Bhagavatam publication, I need centers in the Western countries. So you see, Prabhupada was willing to work for them, and it's interesting that Prabhupada uses this word often, cooperation. In fact, Prabhupada actually says, we'll go through this later, cooperation is bhakti. Prabhupada said to work together with Krishna and the devotees, that is Sankirtan. And you know, Prabhupada told us before he left this world that your love will be tested by how you cooperate. Cooperate means that we have to tolerate certain things. Not that everyone will agree with us, or we will agree with what someone else says, but it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. It's not that a leader can tell the devotees working under them, cooperate with me, you must cooperate with me, because he should use the word properly too. Cooperate means to understand their needs, and the workers' needs, and for the workers to understand the leader's needs or the vision of the mission. And this is a lecture Prabhupada gave in Seattle in 1968. When you do something in cooperation with the Lord, that is called bhakti. So anyway, they did not agree to help Srila Prabhupada's God loves. In fact, they interfered with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada had donors lined up to pay for a temple in New York in 1967, 66, and 67. He had donors in India. And they would not make the arrangements so he could transfer the money to America. Can you imagine that? Not only that, but they tried to interfere with his buying land in Mayapur. Finally, he had to send Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj with an improvised money belt to buy the land in Mayapur, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had to, I guess, bargain and bribe and do whatever was necessary to get our original land for the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. So Prabhupada, in spite of offering to cooperate, got no cooperation, and he got interference in his mission, and still he carried on with great determination. So Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra is very, very interesting. We see Namaste Saraswati Deve. That means that Prabhupada is manifesting the presence of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as his son or his servant. And of course, then the second half is Nirashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari, which is very indicative of his relationship with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was known as a Nishringa Guru. That means he would practically attack people who would preach Mayavadi or impersonal philosophy. There's stories that someone was an impersonalist, he grabbed him by the shirt, and he said, why, if everything is one, are you wearing the shirt? Why not wear a piece of cotton if everything is one? And the impersonalists were afraid of him. Impersonalists, Mayavadis, Deviant, Vaishnava sects were afraid of him. So Srila Prabhupada is taking up that same mood, and you can hear Srila Prabhupada's early lectures in New York, where he's manifesting the Singha, the mood of the lion, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. There's an interesting story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his disciples. One time he sent two disciples to a conference. There was a brahmachari and a sannyasi. And so this is a conference when many Mayavadis were speaking. So the sannyasi, he was just like peace and love. You know, oh, you're nice Mayavadis, kumbaya, whatever he said. But the brahmachari called one of the most famous Mayavadis in India a rascal. And there was a riot at this assembly. Practically the brahmachari and the sannyasi had to run away for their lives. And so they went back to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and the sannyasi complained. The sannyasi said to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this brahmachari rascal, he has actually called this important Mayavadi a rascal. And he caused almost a riot, he almost got us killed. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, oh, he has done a very nice job. So he very much appreciated. Prabhupada called Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's preaching like the cutting technique. And Prabhupada said even some of his godbrothers, that's disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, criticized their guru for that technique. And Prabhupada said they fell down. So Prabhupada was following exactly in the mood of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And instead of the Sri Chaitanya Math, Prabhupada is establishing what's called the TOVP, or the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. The Temple of the Vedic Planetarium originally was planned to be somewhere else on our property in Mayapur. But because of legal reasons, we had to relocate it exactly to the spot where Srila Prabhupada laid the cornerstone. I was with Srila Prabhupada in, I think it was 1976, when he went out into the field and he laid a cornerstone, I think it was an anti-sage he put there, and there was a little plaque on top for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. And it's at that spot, right where Srila Prabhupada laid it, and the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium is being constructed as we speak. Hopefully the deities will be moved in 2016. And this temple is actually a portal, just like how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur envisioned the Sri Chaitanya Math. This Temple of the Vedic Planetarium is a portal to the spiritual world, and looking at the way that Srila Prabhupada instructed us to construct the temple as a planetarium with the different stages of planets, all the way going up to Goloka Vrindavan at the top, which you can see there, I hope. See, that's Goloka Vrindavan, that's Krishna playing his flute. And all the planets circulating below, and there's, of course, all the different dhams, beginning with the Earth planet, and then going up to, going up to the demigods planets, then Brahmaloka at the top, and then you see Lord Vishnu, and ending up in Goloka Vrindavan. So this is very much reminiscent of the story of Gopakumar in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, how he travels through the various realms and goes back to Godhead. So this temple is actually constructed along the lines of a portal, of a door to the spiritual world. And so this is actually our door in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Sri Mayapur Dham, and the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, which is our root of our organization. And by serving this root in different ways, and devotees should all go there at some times to worship Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we can actually proceed to the spiritual world. And now let's talk again about the four founder acharyas we mentioned before, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarkacharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhvacharya. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took their philosophies, which were perfect but not complete, and made them complete in the Achincha Veda Tattva philosophy taught by, of course, our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, because he accomplished something, doing more, and I can say this as a fact, he did more than the four acharyas did. His scope of preaching was far greater. He spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And he can be considered the fifth founder acharya for the Iron Age. Iron Age, of course, means this age of Kali. And that's his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada. So that's a little history about the word or the term founder acharya, where it came from, how it is used, and how it indicates Prabhupada's superlative, superior position. And now those of us who really want to make progress in spiritual life should serve the mission of his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, as Srila Prabhupada served the order of his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, any questions or comments about anything I said? Yes?
There is the position of the impersonalist philosophers, who say the ultimate is void and nirvana and formless entity and depersonalized is the ultimate. But it seems that they're also classed as transcendentalists.
Yes, they are transcendentalists.
They're transcendentalists, and while they differ from the theists who say that God is ultimately a person, Krishna is ultimately the ultimate supreme personality, and he's a person, because they share so much in common, aren't they both so far removed from the common man that if they concurred with each other on most parts instead of attacking each other, it'll make an example for the common man too.
All right, that's a very interesting point. Let me make a distinction right now between Brahmavadis and Mayavadis. Okay, just like you have in the West, you have a distinction between atheists and agnostics. Does everyone know the distinction? What's an agnostic? Can someone tell me? What?
It's someone who doesn't believe in God, but he would if he had sufficient proof. Something.
Yeah, he has no experience, no proof. He said, well, I don't believe in God, but maybe it's possible. So an atheist is what?
Doesn't believe.
Someone who doesn't believe is completely convinced there's no God. He'll even go to the court to try to get all references to God out of the legal system. I mean, where I come from America, obviously. There's people who go to the court. We have this song that we used to sing about our country, One Nation Under God, and they took it out. One Nation Under the Brahmajyoti. No, I'm just joking. So, that's an atheist. They'll spend their money, their time, and there's doctors, university PhDs who write books about atheism. They're so dedicated. I wish I was so dedicated to Krishna as they are to trying to disprove the existence of God, right? Or you have the people like the evolutionists who say that everything evolved. Matter came evolved into life, and then life just evolved up, which completely goes against my understanding of science, the theory or the principle of entropy. Those who studied science, I was a scientist once, that in entropy things tend to go to less complex things. That's a rule of nature. Like if you have a car, your car gets worse with time, right? Has anyone ever had a car, the car has better shape after 10 years or 20 years? No. You got to trade it in after a while because it becomes a piece of junk. So the same thing with anything in this world, that more complex things tend to go to less complex things unless there's conscious intervention. Okay. So that's an atheist. So an agnostic is sort of innocent. He's an innocent person, but an atheist is not innocent. So let's take the two types of impersonalists. I told you, Brahmavadi and Mayavadi. A Brahmavadi is someone who says, oh, I love the Brahmana effulgence, I want to merge into the Brahmana effulgence. And as far as God, I don't know. But a Mayavadi is one who says, God's body, God's personality, God's individuality is Maya. That's why it's called a Mayavadi. Right? And Krishna says he's a Buddha. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita calls him an ass. Avajjananti mam Buddha, he says. So I would say that yes, we can make peace with people who are Brahmavadis. I'll give you a perfect example of a Brahmavadi. Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva Goswami was absorbed in Brahman. Of course, we understand it's a pastime because previously he was Radharani's parrot. But he was absorbed in Brahman. And he, of course, was the son of who? Does anyone remember? Srila Vyasadeva. And what happened, because he was absorbed in Brahman, he was afraid of coming out of his mother's womb. Because once he came out, you know what mothers do with children? They hold them like that. I go to people's houses all the time and the mothers are so proud of their children. Please bless my little boy. Oh, he's so cute. People don't get cuter with age, but at least in the beginning, even Ravana was adorable when he was born. His mother's name was Katha. She said, look at my little baby Ravana. Isn't he sweet? So anyway, when you come out of the womb, usually in the most civilized countries, you get people really pay attention. Can you see my new baby? Wow, he's really cute. So therefore you fall into Maya. Because everyone's looking at you, paying attention to you, buying you birthday presents, and you have all your friends come to your birthday. It's better than Vyas Puja Day. Because you have no responsibilities. You don't have to take care of anybody, right? So it actually causes one to fall in Maya. Like it says, he who praises me is my enemy. In other words, practice prophet adoration distinction. So therefore Shukadeva Goswami said, I'm not getting out of here. I'm staying within the womb of my mother. And he refused to come out. Even Krishna tried to argue him out. You know, it's time to come out. You know, 16 years, it's a lot of time. I mean, your mother's pretty big after that time. So, seriously. And so then what happened is that he heard the Srimad Bhagavatam and then he became a devotee. So that's, you know, that's a bona fide, innocent, aspiring, nice spiritualist, and we can actually make friends with those people. Or the four Kumaras, same thing. They were also Brahmavadis, and then they went to Vaikuntha, smelled the tulsi leaves and flowers over the lotus feet of the Lord, and then they said, well, we better chant Hare Krishna during Lord Chaitanya's movement after that time. So that's fine. But those people who are just blasphemers, people who say, I mean, for example, let's say, do you have any children? No, you don't have any children. Does anyone here have any children? You have children. Okay, you have a son?
Yeah.
So if I say your son is ugly, dumb, lame, stupid, what will you do?
Wouldn't be happy with you.
I think you'd get angry, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, you take your son, oh, here, Maharaj, please bless my son. I said, what? He's lame, he's dumb, he's stupid. You probably do something about it, right? Probably go on my Facebook page and put all sorts of comments about me, and that's a compliment her. So here's God, here's Krishna, and we love Krishna more than he loves his son. Or I hope. Anyway, so we love Krishna, and someone says about Krishna, he has no hands, he has no legs, he has no eyes, he has no brain, and we say, to get ready, what do they say in Hindi? Mushtika? The fist. Is that the Hindi, right? Hindi? Mushtika? Yeah. Mushtika. You get the fist. So, I think those particular people we can't be so friendly with because they're criticizing the person we love. You know, they say, well, you should just worship Krishna and then when you become self-realized, throw him away. Or you can worship anything. Like I was with Prabhupada one time, he was commenting on this one book, Yato Mat Tato Pat, which basically means I'm okay, you're okay. And Prabhupada said, he said, we say to the Mayavadis, not that I'm okay, you're okay, we say I'm okay, you're not okay. So, I mean, that's a Mayavadi. But you're right, I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong. There are many impersonalists who are just plain old innocent, and we can certainly make friends with them, give them some prasadam, bring them to kirtan, and then they forget about their impersonalism.
Well, my question was basically that some impersonalists, including the Mayavadis, follow the regular principles.
Yeah.
They don't eat meat, they don't take intoxicants. So perhaps that might induce them to come to the spiritual platform.
I mean, if they later on can come to accept Krishna, because the problem with being a Mayavadi or impersonalist without Krishna is that you don't have any ultimate liberation. Bhagavatam says, Aruya Krishna Param Padam, that even if you go up to the Param Padam, then ultimately you come down because there's nothing to do up there. Like if you go to the Brahma Jyoti and just float around, after a while it gets pretty boring. Like if you say to a young man or a young woman or child, just sit in the corner and look at the corner. How long can they do that? So if you say to we were discussing this the other morning in class. If you say to a person, or Mayavadi goes up to the Brahma Jyoti, then he gets bored, he comes down. First he comes down in the mode of goodness. He opens up a lot of hospitals. I mean, I know one Mayavadi, not my personal friend, but one Mayavadi, he came down, he was a real good guy. But then because the modes of nature struggled to control the living entity, then after that he got into the mode of passion. So he thought, I should have a Rolls Royce for every day of the year. You know what a Rolls Royce is? And so he got really passionate about money and everything like that. And then after passion came ignorance, and what did he decide? Then he finally ended up getting AIDS and dying. You know, sexually transmitted STD disease. So the problem without having the situation at the Lord's lotus feet is it's not permanent. Because you have really nothing. The soul is by nature active. The soul needs relationships. The soul needs to love. And if the soul doesn't have that, the soul will seek that in this world. Because he won't be happy just doing nothing. In other words, you can't do a don't. And the Mayavadis are trying to do a don't. Negating. Okay? So any other quick questions? Because it's getting time. Questions, comments about the presentation we made about Prabhupada? I mean, I'm personally very inspired to see and understand why Prabhupada took that particular name, Founder Acharya, and how it really does apply to his divine grace.
Maharaj, I have a question. Question, you talked about Gaudiya Math. So I'm interested to know what is the present relationship with them.
The Gaudiya Math is broken up into many different organizations right now, and there's many sincere devotees in those organizations. It's not my business to criticize any Vaishnava. So, I mean, ISKCON has friendly relationships with many of these particular organizations. There's not one Gaudiya Math right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because from Gaudiya Math, one representative came and they told just ISKCON nowadays cannot tolerate us. So just
no.
I understand.
No, ISKCON and the devotees of ISKCON, we love everybody. Fellow travelers on the spiritual path. I mean, I like people of other religions. Sometimes I go to the church when I want to hear some good music. Especially the black churches. They really sing nicely. And they're glorifying God. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita said that we should appreciate any religion who's glorifying God. In other words, chanting the name of God and glorifying God. And we should think, it may not be my religion, but they're using a different name, a different type of system, maybe even do different instruments, but it's the same God that they're glorifying. So I think a member of ISKCON would very much appreciate any organization, be it Gaudiya or Christian organization or Muslim organization, and they're actually glorifying God. Now, if the organization gets political, that's a different thing. Like, for example, I've had some Christians approach me and tell me I'm going to hell. Should I just say, right on? I did say that. Actually, they come to me and say, I'm going to hell, and I said, yes, that would be a nice place to preach. I'm willing to go. And then I explained, it's a very easy place to preach because you don't have to convince people they're suffering. You know, someone's being tortured by Yamaraj, you don't have to say this material world's a place of suffering. When you come to Sydney, you know, you have to really preach hard to people. So we're willing to go to hell. Nothing wrong with it. So, anyway, any other quick questions? Yeah.
All questions, Prabhupada. How did Prabhupada get the title? Initially, sannyasi never practiced Goswami Maharaj. How did he get the title of Prabhupada?
Well, that's an interesting story that the devotees originally called Prabhupada Swamiji. And that is actually, I mean, it's a respectable title, but Prabhupada is a third-class title. So they were asking Prabhupada, you know, what should we call you, Swamiji? And then Prabhupada said, that's a third-class title. Usually the guru is called, you know, Vishnupad or Prabhupada. And the devotee said, well, Prabhupada sounds good. And that's how it was accepted. Basically like that. The Prabhupada accepted that and understood, not through false ego, because Prabhupada had no false ego, but he understood it was necessary for the devotees to give him that proper respect on that level so that they would be serious about carrying out the mission. A devotee is not interested personally in respect. You know, we know Amanina Manidena, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, he's ready to give all respect to others. However, he's concerned with his own reputation and respect so the people, like Lord Chaitanya, let's give an example. Lord Chaitanya, before he took sannyas, wasn't getting a lot of respect. In fact, his own students would sometimes criticize him. He would chant the names of the gopis, And they would criticize, but sometimes Lord Chaitanya ran after them with a stick. That's from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that story. But then, Lord Chaitanya thought, I came here to save everybody. So instead I'm sending people to hell because they're committing offenses. So he took sannyas. One of the main reasons he took sannyas was to get the respect so people would take his mission and his message seriously. So that's a very important part of that. That's the only reason the Vaishnava is concerned with reputation, not for himself, but to spread Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
Maharaj, I go to a Catholic school, right? So when we have Mass and they have the consecrated bread and the wine, and I did ask my teacher if the wine has alcohol in it, and it does. So they drink wine as a symbol
Sacrament.
of, yeah, like a spiritual rejuvenation kind of thing. Would that be offensive, or is that just a sin? Kind of?
You mean on your part?
No, I mean, I don't know.
You take the wine?
I don't drink it. The teachers that do. The teachers that do drink it as part of it.
They're just taking so little. I mean, it's not that they... I've been in churches many times before. It's not that they take a whole bottle and drink that whole bottle of wine. They just dip the cracker in the wine and take it like that. So it's a sacrament. I wouldn't worry about it. It's not that... I've never heard of someone getting intoxicated at the service. I have heard of them getting intoxicated after the service. I was, anyway, this is an interesting story. I used to go to different monasteries to preach to monks, monks in the monastery. Some of them became devotees and disciples. They actually surrendered and became devotees. And after that, they didn't let me back in the monasteries anymore. So I used to go in the monasteries and cook a feast for the monks because they wanted to have interreligious dialogue. So I would go there, they'd give me a house, I'd cook a feast, and then some of them joined me. So they said that, they can't have this guy come to our monastery. So what I found out is that the monastery, sometimes they would drink at night. And one of them, and regularly cars would get smashed. But the monastery had a lot of money, so they could replace the cars. And the monks at night, not to criticize all monks, I mean there's many serious people in the Catholic Church, but they would watch soccer games. And they'd be cheering. I mean, it's hard to imagine. But also that's a message for us devotees. I know many of you are attached to soccer, and rugby, and cricket. Those of you from India are cricket. But that's also in passion. I mean, could you imagine a spiritualist, like someone very high in spiritual life, is sitting in front of the television and saying, kill him, get him, get him. I couldn't imagine that. So if you want to advance quickly in spiritual life, there's certain things that are recommended to avoid, right? Like Prabhupada talked about those things. And Bollywood movies are another thing. Bollywood movies have ruined many people's lives. Why? Because, I don't know why I'm talking about this. Anyway, because when people watch Bollywood movies, they get a false idea of what marriage is like. And then they get married, they think it's going to be like the Bollywood movie. And then they discover it's like the Mahabharata war. Humor for you there. So you have to have humor in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was extremely humorous too. I mean, I was with Prabhupada when a girl asked Prabhupada, why do you have a shaved head? And the girl had a very short skirt on. And Prabhupada said to her, it's better to have a cool head and warm legs. And then the problem is whenever Prabhupada said something like that, all the devotees would go, Jai Prabhupada. You'd have like 100 devotees saying, Jai Prabhupada! So this poor girl was in the corner there, being told by Prabhupada, you should cover your legs, basically. And 100 devotees saying Jai after they heard it. So Prabhupada also had a good sense of humor. So, any other questions? I think we have to end now because it's time. Past some of our bedtimes. Thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Krishna Maharaj ki
jai.